Hail to the king, baby.
Yes, it's Hail to the King. Welcome to this episode of Kingology. We're your host, Mark, and today I'm joined by Becky. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Right, and today we are talking about It, the book It, the big one, right? The big one. Until The Stand got re-edited anyway.
Yeah.
This one, it was written in 1986, came out in 1986. It's King's 22nd book and his 18th novel written under his own name. Basically, it follows a set of experiences, 7 children who's being terrorised by a scary clown, basically, who kind of exploits the fears and phobias of those children. It is what it's kind of normally called, also Pennywise, the dancing clown. Sometimes Bob Gray as well, he goes under that title on the book. And basically, it concerns 2 sort of parallel narratives happening at different time periods. One's in, I think, 57, I believe, and the other one's in the 80s. And it's about them as children and them coming back to the town of Derry, Maine, to face Pennywise again as adults after facing him for the first time. King says he first conceived the story in 1978 and began writing it in 1981. From what I've read, he kind of the idea first came to him as like thinking on a modern way of doing the Free Billy Goat's Gruff story, with a troll, but instead of it being a troll under a bridge, it was someone living in a sewer, and it kind of developed from there. In other statements, he's also said he just wanted to write the be-all and end-all of horror stories, where every creature, every monster he could think of could be incorporated. So, yeah, and it kind of succeeds in that. So, Becky, when did you come to this book for the first time?
So I actually came to the televised miniseries first.
Okay. We're going to be getting to that in another episode or another section, yeah.
We are indeed. But I'm guessing that would have been around about the age of 10, 11. And then I came to the book after that. I couldn't say exactly when, but not too long afterwards.
I do remember I didn't read it when it first came out. I found it quite daunting. The sheer size of it seemed quite daunting. But I think I read it in 88. Also, I definitely read it before the TV series, I think, but memory's a funny thing. So when I say definitely, I mean maybe. But I'm pretty sure I left it a couple of years, and I'm pretty sure I had it. You know what? I've got a paperback edition. If I went and looked when that was printed, I probably, I bought when I read it, and I've still got that edition. So I could probably go figure out when that was printed and what backwards. But there you go. Anyway. I read it pretty early on. So you came to the TV series early on. I guess that meant that whenever you read about Pennywise, you thought of Tim Curry, I'm going to guess.
Yes.
Yes. It's hard not to once you see that TV series. Though I suspect there's going to be a whole generation now that may not have even seen the TV series, that have only seen the modern film, and that'll be their Pennywise, which is fine. I'm very happy with that. So you came to it, so you think 10 or 11?
Definitely later, I'd say teens, but I'm not sure when.
I should imagine it's a bit world-rocking. Well, certain parts of it are quite world-rocking if you read it that young.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually gifted to me, the book, when I was 11, and the size, like you say, really daunted me, and I think I had a flick through when I came to some of the raunchier parts, and at that age I was like, oh, can't read this.
Oh, yes. Okay, where does it fit for you in the sort of King canon? Is it one of your favourites, one of your least favourites, in the middle? Where does it fit for you?
Top,
yeah, me too. It's number one fiction. I always qualify that because, no, actually it's my number one King, but I really hold Danse Macabre really highly as a non-fiction work. And it's my favourite non-fiction book without qualm saying that. I really love Danse Macabre. I think it's got some really useful and interesting things to add to the critic's toolbox in the way it thinks about horror films.
Yes.
And I think it's a really great book. But it is my favourite King overall and my favourite piece of fiction by King. So obviously, I guess. Right, let's sort of jump into the opening scene, and then we'll sort of decompose the characters, I think, rather than scene by scene for now. But I think the opening section is quite important for the book, actually, which is, I mean, there's two things running in parallel. Something that happens in the 50s, something that happens in the 80s. The thing in the 80s is the attack of a gay man, Adrian Mellon, and the thing in the 50s is the Bill Denborough's little brother Georgie wanted to sail a boat, which I think almost everyone must know about that particular scene, right? Even if they've never seen anything, you kind of know that Pennywise is in a sewer trying to tempt a little boy with a balloon, right? I thought this was an amazing intro, actually. Really effective and scary, and sort of you're kind of tense. It's like sitting on the edge of your seat while you're reading a book. Kind of thing. How about you? What do you feel about it?
Yeah, completely. I think it's a nice turn on the monster under the bed.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a good analogy, because it does. It kind of there's a bit of bait and switch, isn't there? Because Georgie's scared of the cellar, and we think there's going to be something in the cellar, don't we? Is our first sort of thing, and it doesn't happen. So it's like, there's a bit of relief, but then the stuff happens with the in the drain cover. I like the fact we also get quite a bit more detail in the book. Like he can sort of smell the funfair and hear some of the sound. Georgie can, right? While he's talking to Pennywise, and Pennywise seems to be quite friendly to him as well, and charming, which is kind of what Pennywise is, isn't he? Really? Very
much so. And like I say, straight away you get those themes of childhood fears. What is under the bed? The monster lurking in the darkness. And I always found it quite interesting when you read on in the book how if Pennywise is meant to be feeding on children, he doesn't seem to feed on Georgie. He seems to just kill him, and he doesn't seem to scare him initially either.
That's an interesting...
To the extent that he scares the other kids.
Yeah, it's an interesting point I never thought of. He kind of doesn't try and terrorise Georgie as such. He just takes him. Georgie's one of the early ones that dies, so maybe Pennywise needs to just initially feed to start off his cycle and then sort of grow into it. He does make mention several times that he likes the terror because it salts the meat to make it taste better, doesn't he?
Maybe, exactly. It's just the fact that he doesn't take the rest of the body. Does he even take the arm, or does he just pull his arm off?
He pulls the arm off and presumably feeds on it, but not
feeds on
quite
that.
Sure.
The other thing I was thinking is, if this is a plan in terms of his long-term feeding habits, if the murder of a child initially is to scare all the other children and to start that.
It could well be. It's kind of, who knows? Actually, an interesting point I've never actually considered. I've read this book many times and never really thought about that. In terms of narrative, it's really the creator of the entire it's not revenge, but Bill not being scared of Pennywise as much anymore and wanting to get back for what he did to his brother. It sets up events. Interestingly, the Adrian Mellon stuff, I think it's quite an interesting one, but we get way less Pennywise. It's just like they say that a clown was biting his armpit. Someone claimed they saw a clown, but they just they didn't find. No one else saw that, or they didn't. They just ignored the. I think there were 2 reports of people seeing the clown, but they just ignore it because they just assume he was attacked for being gay. And again, King gives a really good. King always is good at character. Gives us good insight into this character and how he feels about the town of Derry and why he's there, and we get a lot of backstory, don't we?
Yeah, as usual. And we know from Carrie how King likes to use history and current events in his books, if not directly in terms of metaphors. With Carrie, I know he refers to the women's activism at the time that he was experienced while he was at uni. And I think here when the novel was written in 1981, was it?
86.
86, sorry. I think in terms of...
it was published in 86, but it took 4 years, so 82 was the seeding point, right?
Well, I think, culturally, again at the time, looking at events surrounding how people reacted to gay people at the time.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting in terms of this character not being believed and how this character is treated.
Yeah.
And again, so I quite liked how he's bringing those elements in and, really weaving them into this story, but he's really, again, touching on what's going on in the world.
Yeah. Yes, it is nice. He does that quite nicely. And it kind of lends itself to, I'm going to want to say remakes, but working for each generation in different ways. Right?
Yes.
Because he's delving with character and how they feel about those events. If you're in I personally, for example, I believe Carrie is an eminently suitable story to be retold and retold and retold in film because it deals with bullying and coming of age, which is never going to get old. It's never going to go out of date, is it? There's always going to be people with that issues, and wanting to sort of experience the cathartic. People are familiar with that for their whole lives, aren't they, really? But the young are coming to it pretty fresh. And I think some of the things he picks up, the sort of gay bashing sort of stuff is still around, and it's kind of come back, hasn't it? For whatever reason. So it's always going to resonate with someone, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and anyone's empathetic or sympathetic to that sort of those issues too, right?
Not completely, and I think it also taps into the town of Derry itself, and all the things you can read into that. How this is a facade. Yeah. Everything seems to be okay on the surface, but things are not okay underneath. And I think the sewers again is a very literal metaphor for that.
Yeah, and no one knows what's down there, right? Because they've lost the plans and stuff. It's interesting that he based Derry on the nearest town to him, Bangor. In fact, there's a lot of elements in the town, physical structures in the town that come out in Derry that are actually in Bangor. And how he thinks of Derry makes me think, does this how he feel about Bangor? Or Bangor. I'm not Bangor, I think as they say, isn't it? Right. Okay, we'll get to some of the sort of story in a bit, but let's talk about some of the characters. So we have 7 main characters make up the Losers Club. I think the leader is Bill. I think Richie is probably the second in charge. He often takes that mantle, doesn't he, of like the deputy. He's a joker, but he often will man up, won't he? He will man up and do what he has to. We also got Ben, Eddie, Mike, and Stan, and Bev. I think of all of them, Bev's probably the most interesting one to me.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Bev, I've always connected with her just because she's the only female character within a group of boys, and I was a tomboy growing up, so I had the same friend group, all boys usually, and I think she's really interesting within King's other works. I think she stands out as well. Yeah,
and some of these are analogues, I think, of the characters we already visited in The Body. Bill is very much like is it Geordie? The Will Wheaton character in the film, but and Richie is very much like Teddy. Teddy's a way crazier version though, but I kind of see that vibe too. But some of them are not the same. But Bev is, I think, like I say, the most interesting. How do you feel about in terms of King's set of female characters? We got probably the most famous is Carrie, Wendy, Torrance. Dolores Claiborne and so on. How do you think Bev fits into the female iconography of King?
I think she's probably the strongest of the female characters.
I gave this a lot of thought, and I was thinking about how Susan Norton in Salem's Lot's written and how Wendy in The Shining's written. She's probably the strongest one we've seen in the chronological order of things so far, I would say.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of any other ones. There are a few, and I bet if I really rack my brain, I'll probably think of them. But the thing is, King tends to be much more male centric, but he's happily writing women. And I don't know, from a male perspective, is women seem quite complex and well written. How do you find them?
I think so, and I think with Beth in particular, she is still a victim when she's older. She has repeated that cycle of abuse, whereby she's with a man who is, physically, hurting her on a regular basis. And it isn't until she gets the phone call from Mike to return to Derry because it's come back, that she breaks that cycle. So she isn't just a strong character that has overcome everything and risen from the ranks. She's a really complex character in that she's still a victim, and it's taken something to interrupt her life to make her, to take her out of that situation and make her fight.
Yeah, in many ways, she's the most powerful of them. A, could on a pure sense that she's a really good shot, but B, she's probably the one that is least scared of Pennywise than the others.
Yeah, I think because of her upbringing and what she's already experienced by that point. And I think while that's really interesting, and I wish that would have been expanded upon a little bit, the one problem I have with the book, and this is reiterated in the adaptations quite a bit, is that Bev, it seems everything that happens with them and the magic, if you will, of their grouping, they keep reiterating that, it's like it's meant to be Bev. That everything's fate's already taken that hand and just guided them, and they've not had to do anything themselves. And I think that's too simplistic and takes away from the characters. Because she has this...
On some senses, though, you could see that as an act of faith in Bev, because she is that powerful that they can see that it has to be her, rather than fate saying it's her and then she has to take the role on. It depends on your viewpoint. It's written in such a way as it's complex and lovely writing, right? So, I
think so, and I think it's the way, maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, in that this is where that the rest of the group see her as the only girl, and that it's not a case of all the lads protecting the one girl. They're letting her take her pedestal and enact her role within their group, because everybody does have their own key roles.
Yeah.
In terms of fate, you could argue, as the events unfold throughout the book, both as children and as adults, and I think that's really interesting. It's just that notion of it is meant to be Bev, I find quite problematic in terms of her gender, particularly in the one scene that I'm sure we'll get to later on in the sewers.
I actually do want to, when we get scene by scene, I want to discuss that first to get it out of the way, because I don't want it to be one of the last things we talk about in this podcast. So I want to talk about that first when we get scene by scene. However, let's. One of the things I find I really liked is the fact he relates the way the kids are when they're this young to their grown-up trade. Ben's an architect and Bill's a writer. Yeah, writer. We always get writers in Stephen King, don't we? And Richie's like a radio comedy guy. He's got funnier as he's got older, because none of them think he's particularly funny, do they? That's kind of always makes me laugh. Beat Richie. So basically, each of them separately have an incident with Pennywise, and they're kind of on interesting sort of terms, right? I think Bev's is probably the most interesting, where it involves blood and like a drain hole. Blood and a girl coming of age. That's kind of really an obvious symbolism, isn't it? But it's basically the whole place is covered in blood, and also the sort of odd complex feelings towards her father too. I really like that. And what the other ones, for example, Bill has the picture of Georgie bleeding. Richie has some odd ones. He has a statue. He has a werewolf. At one point, a large statue kind of starts. He imagines a large statue chasing Paul Bunyan, and he also has a thing about a film called The Crawling Eye, a giant eyeball towards the end too. Mike's has a bird, a giant, which is Rodan, which confused me really, because Stanley's the bird watcher, so you think birds would be his thing. But having said that, he probably likes birds, so you can't really use that as fear. Stanley gets a weird kind of zombie creatures in the standpipe, doesn't he? And then Eddie's got a leper, which is like an obvious analogue to sickness, I think, and rotting and stuff like that. And Ben has the mummy, and I think that's just because he doesn't like the mummy movies. So an interesting mix there of weird sort of incidents. And they work quite well, don't they?
They really do. I mean, take Stanley's, for example. What I thought of initially as being quite strange, he is, out of the whole of the group, he's very scared of Pennywise, and he's the weakest character, I think, in regards to their chain.
Isn't he, as a character? Yeah, but he's the one that figures out a way to defeat Pennywise, right? By just using rationality.
Exactly. Everybody has their roles, and that's what I love about their group. And again, like I say, you can tie the fate aspect into that. But the Standpipe, he is terrified of the murders. He doesn't want to confront it in any way, and he sees, children dead in the Standpipe. So it's a very literal fear that ties in perfectly with, like you say, his very rational, organizational approach to this as well as life.
Yeah, Standpipe's a weird name, right? Because I've seen a picture of the Standpipe in Bangor, and it's essentially a short, fat lighthouse is how it looks. That really does look exactly like that. It's a round, sort of thick structure. Just to put it in your mind what we're talking about, it's like a building, isn't it, rather than like a pipe. Standpipe could be a bit. We also have this thing of it's these little touches that King put in that really works. But sometimes they really work against him as well, because he does follow his muse, doesn't he, King? He tends not to play. Is the bike, Bill's bike, Silver, too big for him. It's a massive bike, isn't it? And he has trouble pedaling it. But when he gets it going, it really flies.
I did want to ask you as well. I haven't thought too much about this, but just researching for the podcast, Silver is obviously the name of the bike. The Pennywise is always described as having a suit that's coloured, a silver-coloured suit.
Yes.
In the book, where obviously it's not in the adaptations, and obviously silver is used against the creature. And I just wondered what you thought that.
I think Silver was just I don't know what, because I always think of Pennywise in terms of orange pom-poms, personally, because he uses orange too, right? I know that Silver comes up, especially around his eye colouring as well, but sometimes his decoration. I don't know. Silver's a classic defence against evil, though, right?
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting that the clown is described as being coloured in that way.
Yeah, I think that's more his shiny, maybe.
Maybe,
but I don't know. I don't know. There's any more to it than that. Because certainly sometimes when they see like different colorations or different things, like Rodan, for example, I think he sees Mike sees orange pom poms.
Yeah.
So there is that, and it might be Silver. I'm not quite sure. The town itself is, set out as an evil character, but it really creeps up on you, doesn't it? It's not set out that way at the beginning. It's just they start to realise the entire town's part of it all.
Yeah.
We kind of get that first with the parents. We get not bad parents, but not the greatest parents. Bev's father, for example, she loves him, but she's worried by him. The way it's like he does things not quite appropriate. And she's got nervous around him. And Bill's parents are just washed out because they've lost Georgie, so they're kind of not paying much attention to him, right? Which again, I've already mentioned the body, the Stand By Me movie. One of that was the parents. That in that story, the main character had an elder brother who died, and the parents kind of lost all heart and didn't really watch out for him. And Bill's kind of the same, but not quite that bad.
Very much, I think. And he's also a writer, just like Gordy.
Yes. And we got Eddie's mother, overbearing mother too. But having said that, Mike's got a great parents, and Richie's too. They put up with Richie. They kind of think he's funny. I think they think he's funnier than his friends think he's funny. Actually. But they kind of like, he obviously gets on really well with his parents. Richie, in many ways, Richie's like the most normal of them, really. He's a trash mouth, that's all. I like Richie. I have to say, I do like Richie. But then we get other adults like Mr. Nell doesn't sort of interrupt when, Bill's getting attacked with Henry's gang, for example. And the pharmacist, I can never work out if the pharmacist is entirely horrible or not too bad, but, he does tell Eddie about placebos, but, he's kind of milked his mother for a few years before he gets to that. So I'm never sure. And then, of course, we get Butch Bowers, who's, like, terrible.
Yes.
So we get all of those, and also there's all sort of bad guys. There's Henry Bowers is obviously, but his whole gang isn't great. Tom Rogan we get as a bad guy, and also a very weird one, Patrick Hogstadter. I often think I like the stuff with Patrick Hogstadter, but this book is big, and a lot of people when it came out said it's too big. And King himself thought I should have edited down a bit, and the whole Patrick Hogstadter stuff could have kind of gone. Maybe, but I like it. Having said that,
yeah, me too. I mean, I don't.
Its own little story, really, isn't it?
It is, and I think the book is very much made up of segments in that way, the way that they interconnect. And for me, it didn't feel too long because I was thoroughly engaged throughout. As we said, this is our favourite book within King's wider works, but.
I often wondered in Dance Macabre. Stephen King compliments, I think, James Herbert's The Fog. He quite likes it, and he says it talks about James Herbert recognised there was like a vignette kind of nature to The Fog, so he could just keep telling short little horror stories that had nothing to do with the main narrative, but were kind of fun to write, interspersed with the main narrative. And I think King liked that, and I think he kind of used that in this book.
Completely, and I think on the back of that you get the little stories. For example, Tom Rogan's journey to Derry to basically we're guessing he's going to kill Bev.
Yes.
And also with Butch and Henry, you get really well-rounded bad guys. They're not just a staple. They're not an archetype. There's a reason why Henry is the way he is, and. I think the book would. I think it would lose something. I think if they went in there, and I think it's a great book in that you can take your time reading it. It's massive. You can really just take your time and read a little bit all the way through. And instead of some books you might read in one sitting, I really did take my time the first time, and when I've returned to it. And I think it's nice that you can just dip in and out of this huge world that King's created.
My most recent consumption of it was audiobook, actually, and I think it's Steve Webber on Audible did it. 47 hours, really great version. I could definitely recommend it. He characterises everyone really well. You know where you are, but the thing is, you kind of know where you are with King anyway. It's not a lot of it's not like Game of Thrones where there's a million things going on at once. I think the simplicity of the actual story helps you take your time with it, right? Because you never feel lost.
Yes. Very much so.
Even when you go off on like a 30-page thing about Patrick Hogstadter, it doesn't matter. You're interested in that story. It's just a great character writer. That kind of helps. Which leads me to the next question, which you kind of answered, which is, do you think there's any flab in this book?
I think little things like the Hogstadter part and the Tom Rogan part, not necessarily needed, especially I think with the demise of Tom Rogan, that was a bit anticlimactic.
Tom Rogan just kind of disappeared, right? In effect, kind of. I also think the Audra stuff really wasn't needed personally, which is how the book ends. I think that's a bit of a flat ending. I don't mind it. I'm not saying I think it should go out, but it could have not been there and it would have been fine.
Well, I'm not sure if this would come under our worst sections of the book, but one particular part of the book that I felt wasn't not so much not needed, but that the characters wouldn't necessarily do that was the affair between Bev and Bill. Yeah,
that was weird. And he does this in a few books as well. He did it in the version of The Mist that just seemed weird. Like a Happy Family Man would suddenly do something like that. It just didn't feel right. And again, he does it here. I kind of agree with that too. It felt kind of wrong, really.
And I think the fact that it wasn't included in the miniseries was a great call.
Yes, I agree.
And it's the same with Jaws, Peter Benchley's Jaws. They didn't allude to the affair.
No, and that was unnecessary too.
And it worked. Well, I think it wouldn't have worked within the film at all.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have worked at all. And in the book, it kind of feels weird. However, it's quite well written. It's like it's almost like a Hemingway-esque short story in many respects. Because Hemingway wrote stories kind of like that. That's why I'm saying that, really. I'm not saying it was as good as Hemingway. I'm not saying that. But it's kind of that vibe. well, one last question before we start getting into the seeds and stuff. Pennywise. This is Lovecraft, right? What do you think?
Yes.
It feels like it. It's something from out of space, almost, from the multiverse. It's not a physical... It can be physically sort of represented and actually concretized. You know, they actually terrorize Pennywise by trying to trapping him in its form. But it feels like Lovecraft to me.
Very much, I would say, cosmic horror.
In fact, they did when it comes in what they first describe as a spaceship, and then they qualify it's not so much a spaceship, but it's the best way I can describe it. It's from somewhere else, and there's also the stuff about the turtle, right? So there's very, very massive cosmology involved in this, and you know, Pennywise is there where's he come in the villains roster of King?
Oh, wow. I think definitely up there. I think I'd say at the top, if not top 3.
You know, the tops are maybe Jack Torrance. Is Carrie White a monster? I don't know, but if she is, she'd be up there. The Vampires in Salem's Lot. The Overlook itself, right?
Yeah.
But Pennywise, I think, trumps them all, really.
I think so. You're talking an ancient evil. You're talking cosmic horror here, this unknown entity, if you will. And it's something that I always found really interesting, speaking to people who've seen the miniseries and have never read the book. And if you mention that, you know, there is an actual sci-fi element, they're like, what, really?
Yeah.
So I like the way that the book doesn't necessarily go into too much detail. I mean, we have this really interesting section in the book in which we have first-person thoughts of or story of it itself.
Yeah.
And it describes itself as coming from the macroverse.
Yes.
And, you know, this it's also iterated throughout the book itself when it speaks to the children. You know, I am the eater of worlds. This is ancient evil compared to the turtle, who is a very, in an almost godlike way, won't interfere.
It's like doesn't care to interfere, chooses not to. It's kind of, you assume it's the creator of all things, but chooses not to. And at one point Pennywise thinks, I think the old bastard's dead anyway, and we're kind of intimated it's dead.
Which is really interesting if you think of it in a religious way. God is dead.
Yeah, indeed. But Pennywise isn't entirely sure. And interestingly, towards the end of the book, we find out Pennywise is female and pregnant.
Yes.
And the feeding has something to do with that, perhaps. That's interesting. Right, okay, I'll tell you what, let's get into the scenes. Now, I'm going to pick one only out of order, because I want to get it out. We've already alluded to it. It's the preteen gangbang in the sewer. Towards the end. Should I have just said spoiler alert at this point? Anyway, it's too late. Wow. Hate this section. Hate it. How do you feel about it?
I had trouble, especially when I was younger, and I read it initially as being misogynist because Bev, as I said before, is in terms of the fate aspect. You know, everything seems to center around Bev with all of these male friends in the group, and the special magic group, if you will. The fact that she is the one that needs to have sex with everybody else, I read as a very, like I say, misogynist. It was almost classifying her in terms of her gender, that was her role. Now, I've always found it really complex, and I'll come back to it, and I kind of read different things each time. But I know you've also read Erin Miskell's analysis. From her blog, The Backseat Driver Reviews, and it's a fantastic and very eloquent, much more so than I could have.
If any of our listeners want to read it, Backseat Driver Reviews, just Virgin Sacrifice, It, Bev, and the infamous sewer scene. I will put a link in the show notes, but it's a really good read, and I have to say Erin is very generous in her interpretations, and it's really interesting. And well worth reading. So yeah, Sorry, Becky, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. Just to basically add to that, that from her reading, I've always been interested by and I think that's why the book appealed to me so much when I was younger, and the miniseries in particular, that you have, the loyalty and friendship between this group of friends that lasts forever. And, it's a bond between them. And I think that's a theme that runs through a lot of King's stories. And he writes children and the experience of adolescence really well for me. If his dialogue is a bit iffy at times, I will say Dreamcatcher's a good example, like "fuck me, Freddy" and all that, horrendous. Yeah. But the fact that there's 7 children, and reading into Erin's interpretation, she basically says that Pennywise is female, and that it's all about the act of sex itself in terms of fertility and reproduction.
Yeah.
And that's Bev's power.
Yeah, there's something to that, but there's also the power of pleasure as well, right? Whereas I think Pennywise is wholly destructive and comes about, her conceptions come through terror as such, progenesis, I guess. Giving out young comes from spawns from terror, whereas, in human terms, it comes out of love. So I think there's also that element too.
Completely. And from that, it made me very much think of, in terms of the number 7, and the 7 friends, that the seed of life symbol, which has been used throughout a variety of ancient religions and cultures, that the seed of life, a blueprint of the universe. This is all about fertility. Yeah,
there is. And Pennywise is wholly parthenogenetic. It's not sexual reproduction. It's just reproducing from the energy of fear, almost. Anyway, it's a great Erin stuff is a great read. Definitely recommend it. However, my feeling whenever I read this bit is like, oh man, don't. The thing is, it's written in such a way as to put you in the head of Bev, and it's really well written, which is disturbing. It disturbs me in the same way Lolita by Nabokov disturbs me. Great writing, putting you in the head of not. Well, in that, it's the head of a paedophile, which is awful, right? In this, it's a preteen girl who's, she experiences an orgasm, for example. It's like, oh, man, I find it really troublesome.
Yes, but I think it had to be written from her perspective. And just coming back to your other point there, I think very much fear breeds fear, and that's how it operates. And the mirror idea of that would be, like you say, power of love and loyalty and imagination. And it seems to be that is what the children, that's the only way that the children can defeat it, is the opposite of everything that it thrives on.
I have to say, though, if I was Stephen King's editor and he brought that in, I'd say, Steve, sit down. Right? Sit down. Can we please change this today? Hold hands, affirm love to each other with Bev in charge, and go past this, please. We cannot put this in. And it's like, okay, put the Coke down. But there you go. Anyway, it's in, and we've talked about it somewhat. But I have to say, I do not like this section. But I know that King doesn't I'm not a big fan of censorship in any way, and King has got a history of self-censorship in that he withdrew Rage when school shootings started to happen. And Rage is all about that, you see, before any of it happened, kind of. So it's not averse to self-censorship, but I do wish they would do something with this. But then that would make it infamous, right? More people might read it and read it now. So I don't know, it's really difficult, this one. Anyway, let's talk about some of the main scenes. I'm just going to rattle through these to stop me at any point. So if there's any you particularly want to talk about, and I'll stop at any I particularly want to talk about too. So, first thing I think is, apart from the main narrative, I find it really interesting he breaks up the main sections with these, what he calls interludes, where Mike slowly dawns on Mike that stuff's happening in the town. It starts with Adrian Mellon and goes on from there. The first interlude talks about a group of settlers, I think 300 sort of settling in the area and entirely disappearing like overnight. Interesting, but not much to say about it, other than it's like an epistolary style kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's an account, right? The second one, I think, is probably the best of the interludes. It talks about the black spot, where some black GIs who are being kind of maltreated form their own little clubhouse, because they're not allowed to drink with the white GIs. But it becomes good, doesn't it? The black spot becomes a real party place. They have bands in and all sorts. And it turns out that the townsfolk, they're not the Ku Klux Klan, but they're like the League for, what is it? Something like the League for White Decency or something. They're like the Northern American version of the Ku Klux Klan in the South.
Yeah.
Kind of, but not quite as bad, but almost. But in this case, they kind of burned down this clubhouse with most of the people in it. It's just all really well written, and really, when King's at his best, it just feels completely authentic, right?
It really does, and that was a really interesting account of this type of discrimination in small town, North America.
Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating, and all of these interludes, I think, and also the fact that Mike is the one that, for me, he's the glue throughout the book, and I think you could even argue that he would be the protagonist, not Bill, not Bev, but it's actually Mike.
Mike understands better what's going on because he's got documentation about, the history of the town, right? He understands the town better than anyone, maybe, right?
Definitely, and I think if you're talking about everybody having their own role, he's very much a lighthouse keeper.
Yeah. Yes, he is. He's the beacon that draws them back. Right, he's the watcher.
Yes.
Indeed. It's super important because of that. So there's also a mention of Dick Hallorann, who's a character from The Shining. In this too, he is. We're getting King Universe crossover here a bit. So Dick Hallorann's one of the black GIs involved, right? So that's kind of cool. And we also get some details about how Mike's father, William Hanlon, deals with Butch Bowers. He basically says, you come near my family, I'm going to blow your head off. And Butch Bowers kind of, understand. Even though he's kind of descended into madness himself, he understands to keep away from the Hanlons. But in a way, Henry doesn't quite understand how important that is to Butch, right? The third interlude involves the Bradley gang, a gang of robbers who the town realise who they are, and they all gather with guns, and there's a massive shootout. They all get slaughtered. They're like doxes, they're moles get killed. Everyone gets killed, and in the meantime, Pennywise is kind of hanging around, and someone witnesses him floating above the crowd, like out of a window. That one was alright. It wasn't that memorable, but it was okay. What do you think of it?
Yeah, same. It's just interesting to get that different, like you say, about these different periods in history and how he's actively involved. Or she, I should say, sorry.
And there was kind of a short, fun one where this guy goes crazy with an axe because his best friend gets murdered by these guys. He goes crazy with an axe in a bar, and no one kind of does anything about it. And then finally, the last interlude it's kind of towards the end. They're just starting to forget everything. Right, what happens? And Mike's kind of writing it down frantically before he can forget everything. But he's also the feeling that even as he's writing it down, the words will start to fade from the page. So there'll be no record and no memory of it. It's kind of fine. The black spot one for me was the real standout among all of these. The really, really memorable one.
Yeah.
Okay, so the main narrative, we kind of, they intercross the kids and the adults and stuff like that. But basically, they all start by kind of forming around building this dam in the Barrens, right? And that's kind of fun. They've got an Irish cop who kind of appreciates that kids will be kids, and even with murders going on, they're going to go down there. But he warns them to stick together, doesn't he? So good cop, right? He's a good adult for sure. Then we get stuff like Bill and Richie start looking at the pictures. So Richie witnesses the blood on the pictures too, and we get this whole Newbolt Street house, don't we? Stuff happening at Newbolt Street with the leper and the werewolf. And then again, they kind of start realising they're all having this experience where Bev asks them to go and witness this blood that she thinks only she can see, and she's worried she's going crazy. But they help her clean out, right? So that's them coming together and recognising that it's not just individual stuff going on. Very important, right?
Yeah.
And this goes on. We get they've kind of encountered Mike because he's being chased by Henry and his gang, and it's kind of turned deadly. Henry intends to use this massive firework on Mike, which will probably blow his hand or foot off or something, right? But they have what's called the apocalyptic rock fight, which I've very much enjoyed. Ben goes nuts here when Bev gets hit by a stone, right? Because one of the things is Ben crushes on Bev big time. He writes that nice little haiku, doesn't he? Autumn embers about her hair, right? Your hair burns like autumn ember. I can't remember what it is. But it's kind of sweet.
Fire. I think January embers. My hair burns there too.
Yeah, what a great little poem. Yeah, Ben should have been the writer, right?
Yeah.
And then they build a clubhouse, which is kind of hidden, which I remember doing as a kid. Remember building a sort of in this woods near where I live, which is quite unusual in London, right? But there was this little like woodland area, and we actually built a camp, which you could not detect when the door was over the front of it. It was that good, right? It was amazing. I built something like that. It was not something like these guys. These guys built one people could walk over and not realise. That was amazing. But that's because Ben was an architect type, right? And then they convert it into like a smoke hole because they've heard about it. Native Americans could like have this smoke ceremony where they see things, and they actually do that, don't they? And it's like they realise what they're dealing with.
True. This is what instigates the ritual of Chud, isn't it?
Yeah, someone's read about the ritual of Chud, which I've looked up, and I can't find any reference. I think King made that up completely. I think. It sounds authentic, though, right?
Yes. What did you think about?
What do you mean?
The ritual itself and what it meant and how that kind of prepped the children for their battle. Because essentially I took it to be a battle of wills.
Yes, it's a battle of who can blink first, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially it. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was really good, really good. I can't see it translating into anything, so I understand why it at all wasn't in the TV series, say. Yeah, I really like that, and it led it to the cosmic horror element, right? Much more so. I think some people might not like that because it becomes really way out compared to the main story, right? But I think it's very good. And they start to realise they can actually hurt Pennywise by believing they can hurt Pennywise. We get Eddie in his, he declares his inhaler is acid, and he can burn it. And they can realise they can use the silver dollars against the werewolf when it's in werewolf form and all of that. So we get all sorts going on. We get some very dark interludes. Again, Bev's one seemed to be the most heinous in some ways because dealing with her father. There's one line which is where he goes, "I want to check you're still intact." It's like, oh man, it's like, that's grim, right?
Yeah.
And Henry's like chases them into the. Henry kills his own father as well because he's gone mad, right?
Yeah.
And he essentially. What happens is when they defeat Pennywise the first time, Henry gets blamed for all the killings because he's gone insane, and the town kind of goes along with it because they can't think why else this would be. So that's why Pennywise isn't kind of exposed to more people at that time, right?
Yep, and as I was saying from the beginning of the second section, who's going to believe people anyway? Nobody.
No.
He's believing that people are seeing a clown biting people to death or whatever. But
in essence, they have to go down into the sewers. They're kind of chased in by Henry when they're kids. They voluntarily go down when they're adults. And I've kind of skipped by a lot of the adult stuff. There's a whole section where they meet at a restaurant and they get these fortune cookies that are kind of horrible and monstrous. There's like an iron one and stuff like that, and weird bugs. One turns into a weird bug. Like a mutant bug, which kind of sounds a bit like something out of the Mist, doesn't it? And there's stuff like that. That's kind of all cool. The writing is quite spectacular, isn't it? Really,
it is. And like I said before, despite the length of the book, it's for me anyway. It was thoroughly engaging throughout.
Yeah, it's a great, entertaining read. It's almost one I'd say to someone: don't read that as your first King because it kind of is one of the best. And if you really like it, nothing else is going to quite live up to it. And if you don't like it, it's a bit it's Deep King, isn't it? So it's kind of maybe something a bit lighter like Carrie or Salem's Lot might be a better first read.
Definitely.
I always suggest chronologically. That's my go-to when people ask me about it. I say, read Carrie first and carry on from it. So we get Henry. Again, the Henry thing's kind of well, actually, the first one's an anticlimax because Henry just goes mad and his hair goes white, kind of. But in the second one, he's much more active. You know, he attacks Mike and nearly kills Mike, right? And then he goes for Eddie. Eddie. I should mention when he goes between Mike and Eddie, he gets a lift from Christine, the Plymouth Fury. How about that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in this. I mean, Dreamcatcher, the standpipe is no longer there.
Okay.
In Dreamcatcher, and there is a plaque where it used to be with Pennywise lives in graffiti.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, because doesn't it say something like Pennywise lives or something?
Yeah.
I've only read a bit of Dreamcatcher, but I'm aware of that. It's one of the few books I stopped reading of King's.
Yeah, it's not his best. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, I've only ever stopped 2 King books. One is Dreamcatcher, and the other's Tommyknockers,
which again has a big connection to it.
It's the sci-fi one, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but they actually reference the child murders in Derry, and somebody sees Pennywise in Tommyknockers.
Yeah.
But yeah, also Mr. Bob Gray, the clown, also relates. I think it must reference Dreamcatcher. Mr. Gray. Mr.
Gray.
Which I took to be initially as a reference to the aliens, the Greys.
Yeah.
But
yeah, good one. Did I've told this story several times, but I've told you the story about when I was reading it one time and went to the doctors. Have I told you this story?
I don't think so.
All right, I'm going to give you a really brief version. Was reading it most of the way through. Quite a way in. Went into the doctor's surgery, and there was only one other person in the surgery, and the receptionist wasn't at the counter, but there's something going on behind. And I said, I've got an appointment with the doctor, and just called through, and they said, oh, what's your name? I said, Mark Kane. And I said, take a seat. And I took it with me. I was reading it. And the other person goes into the surgery, and I'm just reading, and the light's starting to fade. And they didn't have the lights on, so it's like getting harder and harder to read, so I'm really concentrating. I got to one of the few times they mentioned the word Bob Gray as a title. There's a few in the book, right? But I got to one of those, one of the interludes, I think. And the other person in the waiting room goes in, and I'm sitting there reading. I didn't notice the other person come out at all. If they must have, but I just didn't notice it. So I was the only one there. Didn't see the receptionist all this time. Suddenly, a voice calls out, Bob Gray. And I'm reading it, and you know what it's like? Reality starts changing in a bad way, right? It's like, and I looked up and I thought, did she just say Bob Gray? And then suddenly, after a minute, it's like, Mark Kane. So I just went in, but that was super freaky.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't see anyone. There was no one around. I'm in a darkened waiting room. Bob Gray. Yeah. I've told that story a few times. I bet at least someone listening has heard that. Oh, here he goes again. But anyway, yeah, it's a scary one. Anyway. So basically, the ending of the book culminates. Well, not the very ending, but near the end. We get the parallel fights, don't we? We get the kids doing their fight, and the adults doing their fight. So it's kind of a double sort of climax in it, almost George Lucas kind of cross-editing way. It kind of works, doesn't it?
Yes. Very much so.
Really exciting, actually, really tense. But then the kids get lost on the way out, and we have that scene we've just talked about, and it's like, and then they get out. And also, when the adults get out, the town, before they get out of the sewers, the town starts collapsing around them, right? The whole town falls apart. It's a literal version of what they've metaphorically just done, beaten the town monster, and the town's falling to pieces. So there's all that devastation, which is fine. It was fairly, okay. And then Audra also has turned up and got herself kidnapped and looked into the deadlights, and her mind's gone, and Bill has to put her on his silver and ride along, right? and bring her back, which I could have done without, frankly. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it was. I think, again, it's just that power of belief. Right at the end, we get a bit more, because the one thing that quite upset me, particularly from the miniseries, because like I say, that's my first experience of the story itself, but then reading the book, is that everybody, they all forget each other, and that bond that has, lasted throughout the years is breaking apart, and they'll go on and live their lives and not remember each other. I thought that was really sad. But you get that, we've talked about this power of imagination, or the belief in childhood, and how potent that is, and how as adults, I think, because it says to Bill at one point during the ritual of Chud, you're too old.
Yeah, you don't believe enough, right? It is about the power of belief. That's really quite important. King often described this book as a book about childhood, not about monsters. So
I think he very much focuses on memory, which is a recurrent theme in his books, and how memory is a link between childhood and adulthood. Yeah. And that, the film really, for me, taps into that childlike notion of having forever in front of you. Those endless summers, and you can do whatever you want when they all talk about what they want to be when they're older. Yeah. And then seeing the realization of how their lives pan out. It's really quite... it's nostalgic, I think, in terms of coming back to the book as an adult, but it's quite bittersweet.
Yeah, it is bittersweet. Bittersweet is the right word. And while I said I could have done without this, I didn't want the book to end. I know every time I read it, I don't want to get to the end. I want it to keep going. So I'm happy with... I'm kind of, I could have done without that, but you know what? I didn't want the book to end anyway, so I was fine with it.
Yeah, and I was quite sad that Eddie died. That did upset me.
Yeah, that is a shame, because Eddie's a good character. I like Eddie because he's like a nerdy, wimpy type, but he's not either. He's also strong in his own way.
Yeah.
So, again, non-conventional. It's kind of good, complex writing, right? Stan's the only really significantly underwritten one, in my mind. I
think so,
really don't get that much insight into Stan.
But by the same rule, I think Stan is very simple in terms of, the way he approaches life is very simplistic. Yeah. So, like you say, it's very, his life's about routine and organisation and classification and such, and that is how he compartmentalises everything, including the horrors. Yeah. That he can't, as an adult, he literally can't deal with that. Which is quite sad, but I think it fits his character well. Yeah,
maybe. The thing is, we only really get an insight into Stan when he's dealing with Pennywise, right? That's the only major time we deal with Stan. The others, we get them doing other stuff.
True, that is very true.
We get Beth and her father. We get Eddie. Has a great... First, he has to deal with the pharmacist telling him about placebos, but then he uses this knowledge to make sure he can keep seeing his friend, even though his mother says he can't. And that is a really good insight. Richie is kind of throughout. He's just part of the tapestry, right? And I think Ben and Bill are too. So that's fine. It's just Stan. And Mike's got his own, historian stuff. And, he has to deal with Henry and stuff like that. But Stan doesn't have anything like that much, apart from the actual, the standpipe stuff. That's the problem, maybe.
True, no, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a great book. Let's. Any final thoughts?
Just to say to you, in terms of what it is, do you have a theory? One thing that came to me, I think, while watching the adaptation and the new film again, is that it seems very much to be, in a quite devilish way or demonic way, a character that it plays on your fears and can actually morph and shapeshift into those, or it can offer you kind of a deal. I think some characters, it produces what they want for a price.
Henry,
it kind of does.
Right.
Yeah, very much so. In a way for me that I read as being quite demonic or devil-like.
Yeah, it's definitely a touch of the devilish, sort of incubus, succubus, temptation kind of thing. He'll give you something that you want, but he won't stick to his deal, right? He'll happily kill Henry once he's had his use. Yes, in some ways you could see him as a monster of the id as well, kind of thing, right? Forbidden Planet kind of stuff. Well, mind you, that's more of a sensory thing.
It plays on the name as well, though.
I like the fact it transforms its appearance based on what you think. but that act also concretes it and makes it vulnerable. I kind of like all of that about it. I think it's something other. That's, as King kind of puts it, it's from somewhere else. Why it picks one small town and stays there is a bit odd. Presumably there's thousands of these things through the universe, though, not just the one.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Is it the, antithesis to the turtle, or is, I am the eater of worlds?
Yeah.
That is a really interesting concept, and I love how it's never fully discussed or, disclosed by King.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that Pennywise, this is just one facet of Pennywise, and there's thousands of facets of Pennywise.
Yeah.
Which would make more sense in this cosmology, right?
Oh, completely, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I think it's definitely he's taking this lead from Lovecraft. Interestingly, King really doesn't do much. He loves Lovecraft, but he doesn't do Lovecraft-style stuff. It's only really this. There's probably others, but there's a really good short story called Jerusalem's Lot, I think in Night Shift, in one of his collections anyway, that he tackles and mimics Lovecraft. He mimics Lovecraft style in that one. Very successfully. It's like one of the better written Lovecraft pieces. In fact, I'd recommend it definitely if you like Lovecraft. But yes, my final thoughts on this is I think it's just a terrific book. I think the fact he hits all these different monsters from that era, the 50s era. Frankenstein's monster and the creature and the werewolf and the crawling eye and Rodan, even which is like I wouldn't expect. I'd expect it all to be the Universal monsters, but he drags in Rodan, which I kind of liked. I like that aspect of it. Because when I read this, I thought it was going to be a simple tale, because it reads simple in terms of this thing can appear at whatever scares you the most, and that's what it is. So in terms of if like someone like Guy N. Smith were to write that, you kind of know what you get, right? You get a different monster each chapter. But this is much more complex than that, right? It definitely is. It is a study of childhood. I think that's a good way that King, Sting,
very different. I think
King puts it. What would you give this out of 10?
I would give this a 9.5 out of 10.
Oh, I'm going to be a pure and say 10. I have problems with it, but honestly, I don't think he's ever bettered this. And I can't be absolutely sure on it because I haven't read every single book. But man, this is such a terrific book. It really is. And like I say, I can thoroughly recommend the Audible version, the audiobook version by Steve Webber. I hope it's Steve Webber. Now I keep saying it. It's got its troublesome elements. We kind of referred to Erin's article, which we'll put in the show notes. But it's mostly, I think it's a hit. Pretty much every section is a hit. Even the stuff that didn't need to be there is still well worth reading and worth your time. Okay, let's call this section over. So next time we talk about this, we'll be talking about the movies, right? The TV series and the movies. So I'm looking forward to that. So bye from me.
Bye from me.
And I'm going to go out on a new thing now. Hail to the King.
Hail to the King, baby.